Facciamo una foto tutti insieme. Together. Una foto together.
Professor here.
Together.
Foto. Con la bandiera la foto, dov'è avevi la bandiera? Prendi la bandiera, con la bandiera la foto.
Ecco.
Con la bandiera la foto.
Lei là con la foto.
Con la bandiera la foto. Wow.
Yes. Emilia.
Beh. La volevo mettere qua io.
Scusi professoressa, il protocollo si parla dalla tribuna o
No, scusami, qua, tutti da qua. Buonasera a tutti. Siamo alla seconda giornata del...
Good evening. This is our second day of this year's meeting on certainty, and it is an absolute certainty that we are confronted with today. The certainty, the history of a meeting, of dialogue, of friendship, which started a few years ago at the Rimini meeting, and which then continued in Cairo, and which has been going on over the past few months in a way which is really surprising and amazing, a story which is acquiring more and more energy and intensified relationship with our new friends here in Rimini. Now, none of the guests that are here at the table here with me, none of them have come to the meeting only for formal reasons, but also for friendship, for personal relationships. And as Wahil Farouk said, unfortunately, he is not here with us for today, but will be here soon. He's not here, but there are no abstract values. Values are always related to people, and this value of friendship between peoples is true because it is based on personal relationships, on something absolutely true. Now, the distinguished speakers that are here at the table today, may I introduce them to you, because while introducing them, I think that you will be able to understand also the dialogue, the stories, the friendship that is behind each and every one of them. Antonius Naguib, the Patriarch of Alexandria of the Catholic Copts, to my right. The Patriarch, it's a great honor having him here, as he did already in Cairo during that meeting. The days when he had only just been appointed cardinal on the part of the Pope Benedict, and he had just returned from the Special Assembly of the Synod of the Bishops of the Middle East, where the Pontiff had appointed him as General Rapporteur. Professor Usamah Elabed, the President of the University. The University of Al-Azhar, the most important academic institution of the Sunni Islamic world, founded in the year 970, with more than 25,000 students. I'm sure you've all read the interview that the professor gave to our sussidiario, and in that interview he mentions the commitment of the university and the mosque in Al-Azhar to the benefit of peace and peaceful coexistence. And we've been struck to see how true it is that much more important than a religious difference, there is a common passion for the truth in the human experience, that whenever is implemented and whenever it is acknowledged, it is in itself the evidence of a friendship. And I see that Professor is nodding. Thank you. The Bishop Armiah, General Bishop and Secretary of His Holiness Pope Shenouda III, the top authority of the Patriarch in Alexandria.
Lo ringrazio per il grande onore.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor having you here. Thank you very much. And may I remind you that during meeting Cairo, we had met many friends of the Coptic Church, many of which work together with Muslim and Catholics as volunteers for the organization of the meeting. So your presence here is a sign of acknowledgement for all this. Thank you.
Hosam Mekkawy.
Hosam Mekkawy, a judge, president of the Tribunal of Cairo South, to my left.
Hosam è... Il professore giustamente mi corregge.
Hosam. He took part in the Rimini meeting in 2009 and 2008, and we read with great emotions his interviews during the riots in Tahrir Square, when he explained that meeting Cairo had promoted a new conscience on the part of the Egyptians that had taken to the street to protest. And it was also a great emotion to hear that a few months ago, in July, actually quite recently, he declared in an interview about his relationship with those dreams about destiny that sometimes you make, and those encounters with unknown people which end up being your friends for the rest of your life. Thank you very much for your display of friendship.
E infine vi presento Abdel-Fattah.
And then last but not least, Abdel-Fattah Hassan, Professor of Italian Literature, Professor at the University of El Cairo.
Il professore Fattah Hassan è stato anche...
Professor Fattah Hassan is also a former member of the Egyptian Parliament from the year 2005-2010. I met him at the meeting in Cairo. He was my own personal translator during my participation at a meeting in Cairo, and you will soon hear that his Italian is extremely fluent, is excellent. Tomorrow morning he will present an important book which he translated into Arabic. Today he will read for us the intervention of the president of meeting Cairo. She was unable to come, Mrs. Tahani Al-Gibali. She was unable to come she had a problem in her family. Thank you very much.
Aggiungo che Tani è stata la prima donna egiziana.
May I remind that Tahani was the first Egyptian woman to become a judge. Now, this is the end of my introductions of today's guests. I think this was more than enough to introduce you to the topic of today. This meeting focused on certainty with a specific accent on the experience of meeting Cairo, but not so much just to remember and commemorate something which has already taken place, but because meeting Cairo was the starting point of a long-standing stories of relationships, friendships which have been growing and mixing with culture and tradition. With this dear and beloved country of Egypt, Egypt which is dear to many of us, more and more so,
E credo che ci sia diventato anche
Egypt more and more dear to us, especially looking at recent events in this fight and struggle for freedom, with the participation of many of our friends that are here today. So this growing relationship of the past few months had not been planned. Like, everything that takes place in the meeting, hardly anything is planned. Everything started from an encounter. Something unexpected happened and hit some of us, awakening our hearts and leading to a formidable impact. Now, the beauty is the topic, the beauty and the space of dialogue. I think the title speaks for itself. We have actually taken it from our Egyptian friends, also because that was the title of the first edition of Meeting Cairo, which took place at the end of October of the year 2010. Now, before concluding my initial remarks, may I mention two other important figures in this long-standing story of friendship. First of all, my friend Wahil Farouk, here, sitting in the front row. Wahil, University Professor, Vice President of Meeting Cairo. He will speak on Friday during a meeting with our Italian Foreign Minister, Mr. Frattini. But it was important to mention him today because the strength of his heart and his willingness to work with us, the opening of reasons, the heart, etc. I think you all remember what he said here at the meeting, and I think this was all very much important for our encounter. We're very grateful. And then, may I also mention all the young people from Cairo and Alexandria who are present here today with us.
tanti di loro fanno i
Many of them are serving as volunteers here at the Rimini meeting, and they already served as volunteers during the Cairo meeting. May I conclude by saying that thanks to all of these friends, the guests that are here sitting around the table, the people that we met at Meeting Cairo, for all the Egyptian people, we have all been on their side and close to them during the months of the revolution. We prayed a lot for them, for their families, and today we can only be very grateful thankful because we can welcome them here together with so many new friends. Thank you.
La parola ora a Sua Grazia Armiah, Vescovo Generale.
The first speaker, the Bishop Armiah, General Bishop and Secretary of His Holiness Pope Shenouda III, please.
اخواتي الاحباء اعضاء مؤتمر ميتنج ريمبني
Ladies and gentlemen and organizers of the Rimini meeting, thank you very much for the invitation. We represent here the Orthodox Coptic Church in Egypt. And I've been given the task to hold this presentation, to speak here at the Rimini meeting. The title is Egypt, Beauty and Space for Dialogue. Egypt comes from the word Memphis, the ancient language of Egypt. Original Hakata, the house of the soul. And then in Greek it became Aegyptos, and then the modern term Egypt in nearly all the languages, modern languages of the world. And then in the Arabic language, the word further transformed into Egypt. And the ancient Egyptians had called their country with different names, like Kihimi, meaning the black land, or the two lands, the lower Egypt and the upper Egypt. And then in modern languages, Egypt or Copt have the same root. Egypt, of course, is the land of the Egyptians and also important for the world. In the sacred books, Egypt is often referred to as the fair land, or as a poet once said, it's like the eternal garden, the poetry of it. And also the poet Moses in the book of the Apostles in the New Testament said that Moses was instructed according to all the knowledge and the wisdom of the Egyptians. And then fathers Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, all went to Egypt. And also in the book of Isaiah, the family had escaped to Egypt to flee from Herodes. It's a well-known story, the journey of the Holy Family to Egypt. With reference to the water of the River Nile, it is very often referred to in the ceremonies of the Coptic Church. And we celebrate a ceremony whereby the water is blessed, and somebody said that the Coptic Church is an ancient Egyptian glory, and in its heritage, the Egyptian civilization inherited all the aspects. Those who want to know something about the ancient Egypt inevitably must encounter the Coptic Church, its heritage, and all the tradition that's been accumulating down the centuries. Egypt is also a promoter of an Islamic and Christian dialogue, which is not a theoretical or doctrinal dialogue, but it is also cultural and social in nature. On the basis of an idea of Tahib of the Mosque Al-Azhar, and we have accepted this idea of His Holiness the Pope Shenouda III. The idea of setting up an independent body called the House of the Egyptian Family, presided by Sheikh Al-Azhar and by the Pope of the Orthodox Church. This to preserve the heritage of the sons of Egypt. Now, to fulfill this aim, this house will be free to communicate and to communicate with all the bodies and all the ministries of the state, to which they will put forward proposals, and also the organization of meetings and conventions in all the provinces of Egypt. Then, talking about democracy or citizenship, we see that the religious history of Egypt is divided in two different periods, starting from the 1st century. In the first period, the majority of the Egyptians had one single religion, Christianity. In the second period, starting in 640 until present times, a coexistence of different religions in Egypt. Obviously, mainly the Christianity and the Islamic region. But there's another important division in political terms, which has been distinctive of Egyptian history in the past 100 years. These two divisions, both the religion, the religious, and the political divisions, were mixed, were intertwined. And what they had in common was the Egyptian nature, democracy. Democracy, in its right interpretation, has to do with the form of government, which should never be an excessive exercise of authority in the hands of a few people, a few members of society, or even worse, in the hands of one single person. Christianity came to Egypt towards the middle of the 1st century, thanks to St. Mark, the author of the second Gospel. Egyptians were Christians that formed a community which is now called the Coptic Church. which has been in Egypt for the past 20 centuries. And for the past 20 centuries has been exercising its functions, playing its role. It absorbed what was then called the Egyptian entity. Muslims and Christians got together, cooperated together in the religious ceremonies, sharing the prayer, and those who are keen on Egyptian history, the experts, can find several things in common. The elements which form the Egyptian entity, the people, the land, the geography. And these people living in harmony despite a religious difference. Therefore, and that's how these elements were gradually formed over time. Therefore, the religion was used in Egypt to unite the Egyptian people in their daily lives with all the social, cultural, and psychological implications that you can think of. Religion has always been an element of sharing and not a reason for division, separations, or clashes. Furthermore, the constant presence of the other in all the aspects of society and life in common inevitably defines the room, the space of freedom available for the people, being able to control their behavior in all the various aspects of life. Therefore, equality among the various citizens, Christian and Coptic citizens, equality is something natural and obvious. The white revolution of the 25th of January broke out because in a civilized and democratic country based on equality and the rule of law, which respects pluralism, diversity, and justice and equality between its citizens. And I hope that this beautiful spirit of Egypt, beautiful spirit of the state, of the nation, could be lost and we could go back to a situation where the rich become richer and become very authoritative and the poor become poorer. I am afraid that we could lose the benefits of the revolution, the beauty of work, the beauty of justice, the richness, the wealth of Egypt and its beauty. This is something that cannot take place without the Muslim, without the Copts, without their cooperation in the respective churches or mosques. With the richness of the entire Middle East, the richness of the world. We really hope that Egypt can remain united. We really hope that Egypt, which is now hurt, a country which has been hurt. There have been threats and violence. There are people who want to harm Egypt. There are certain interests that could push Egypt to collapse instead of cooperating. In Egypt, there could be 160 million hands to prevent Egypt from collapsing. Egypt and the Egyptian need us more than ever nowadays. We should not leave Egypt alone. We should never abandon this beautiful nation. They are desperately crying for help. Egypt needs our help. So I think our Christian hands should be there to help Egypt, the elderly and the young, men and women. Egypt requesting each and every one of us to do something for the country to help. And we can all do something. We can all do what we can. In this connection, the poet Al-Azhar wrote a poem whose title is Unity in God. The Copts are united and brothers with the Muslims. We are united in love and brotherhood, and friendship and closeness becomes religion. The Nile, the river Nile, is our father, which can quench our thirst. This is the unity devised by God, sumptuous model of unity. So, my dear friends, let's pray God so that He can protect Egypt and can save the world from disgrace and disease. Hopefully that peace and tranquility will prevail all over the world. And let us thank all those that contributed to the success of this meeting, in particular Father Ambrogio Pisoni, and thank you very much for your attention.
La parola ora al professore Usamah.
Now the floor to Professor Usamah Elabed, Dean of the Al-Azhar Faculty, University.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of God,
والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين. يسعدني أن أكون هنا اليوم بينكم.
I am most happy to be here among you today. I spent only one day here in your city, but I was struck by what I saw here, the spirit of friendship and love, and the desire to be at the public service for a dialogue with the others. I was struck by what I heard yesterday from the President of the Italian Republic. I was struck by his words very much. I was also struck by his enthusiasm and by his young spirit that aspires to the future. It's quite promising. His words on the Egyptian revolution felt in my conscience. He told me, Egypt has resurged. That's why I'd like to thank Mrs. Emilia Guarnieri for her kind invitation to me to participate in this meeting. Egypt was mentioned in the Quran, and that country mentioned in the Quran is an African country from the geographical point of view. It's got ancient roots. It faces the Mediterranean Sea, the Sunnis, and also it faces the Sunnis. It faced the Sunnis in Asia. For more than 1400 years, it has had connections with the south of Europe, and it's an important link to it was an important link to understand the Greeks and their philosophy from the religious, civil, and intellectual point of view. It's got a stratified, a tier structure. You have the tier of the pharaohs in the past who produced a monotheistic vision and the vision of the eternity of the soul. Moses gave this to us, and peace be with him. Monotheism is in Judaism. He embraced Mary the Virgin and her son. Egypt accepted the invitation of Islam by opening its doors. It was a tolerant country, embracing all this multitude, giving value to it and enriching it. It is a country which has always been unique, peaceful, and safe. Egypt used to be the deposit of food. There are still monuments of the older times. The oldest neighborhood had the first mosque ever built, not only in Cairo, but in the whole of Africa. Then in front of this, in the same neighborhood, you have the Ben Isra synagogue and the Junaisa, which keeps the documents of the religious Jewish life in Egypt. Then the third point of the sacred triangle is the pendant church. If Cairo had been aware of racism, had known racism or fanatism, one of these monuments would have overwhelmed the others and eliminated them. In recent times, there were so many attempts at breaking the national unity and controlling our people and resources. Attempts were made at this by the British during the Sahul Revolution in 1919. Then the Christians and the Pope of the Egyptian Church took a patriotic position, and this was unforgettable. They went to the Al-Azhar mosque with the motto, "Religion belongs to God and the homeland belongs to all." Up with the cross with the crescent. Long life to the cross with the crescent. The Egyptians have an inherited sentiment towards citizenship independently of race, religion, or ideological orientation. As is the case in so many countries, every now and then there is some kind of Muslim or Christian religious extremism which accompanies some kind of external pressure on Egypt and requires the reaction of one party on the other. There are disagreements also between neighbors, Christians and Muslims. This disagreement can also be found between two brothers from the same religion. And the media always enhance the issues, and they suggest that everything is about to explode all the time, and they show disagreement as if it was disagreement between the Egyptian Christians and Muslims, but this is absolutely not true. This is a habit of the media in an era of global extremism, but the Egyptian people do not pay attention to all this. They are not afraid or influenced by all this. Extremists, be them Christian or Muslim, are far from knowing, are far from the right science. They all ignore the truth of their religion and its invitation to peace and love. They ignore, even more so, also the religion of the others. Extremists are far from the true faith. Ignorant Muslims and Christians are those who react. They are blind and they blindly follow all ambiguous invitations. They do not check the truthfulness of things. True religion invites one to get certainty. In the glorious Quran you read, "O believers, if a wicked person brings a piece of news to you, you have to verify it so that you don't convey it to somebody else and then regret this." Cairo's Egypt, Egypt with thousands of years of history, Egypt with the history of faith, fully aware of its identity and culture, will always retain the spirit of its people, good and tolerant people. It will continue being the homeland of diversity and true faith, as well as dialogue based on mutual acknowledgement of beliefs. And also, it will always rely on principles and shared values between Egypt and the rest of mankind. In the Bible, you read that one should love each other with fraternal love. The Quran says God doesn't forbid that you are good and just towards those that did not fight you because of your religion or forced you out of your homes, because God loves those that behave in equity. Those that cause divisions and disagreements among citizens must know that this goal is far away, because the mosque always says Allah Akbar, Allah is great, and the church states that God is love. Ethics in Islam is a moderate method which considers the interests of the individuals and the community. It also extends its concept to include ethics of the state and the relationship between the governors and the governed, the rulers and those that are ruled. Ethics rule the relationship between the Muslims of all over the world, with an invitation to keep peace and promises, with an invitation to tolerance and brotherly neighborhood without aggressions. Ethics would ensure security and peace to all nations and states. In the glorious Quran, bad and good actions are absolutely not the same. You have to reject one with something that is better. Those that you're not a friend of will become friends of yours. Islam established the principle of human brotherhood in its highest form among all men and women. This principle is the basis for relations among individuals and communities. This also implies equality in rights and duties, on account of the fact that all men have a single root, being the children of Adam and Eve. They are received and accommodated in this big womb, which includes and encompasses the whole of mankind. These words are echoed in the Quran. Men, you should fear your Lord that created you out of one single being. And then it says, men, we created you out of a man and a woman, and we created peoples and tribes for you to get to know each other. Also, through the actions and speeches of our Prophet and his followers, the good example was set. The Prophet stands up while listening to a prayer. People told him, it's a dead Jew. He answered, but it was alive. Al-Bital, when he sent Al-Azhar as his governor to Egypt, said, be good to your people, good and sympathetic to your people. Your behaviors should always show love and kindness. You should not behave as a feral animal, not like a wild animal. You either have brothers in religion or fellows in humanity. Muslims live and non-Muslims live in just one homeland that they protect through their lives. They coexist and live under the same sky.
بين الطرفين.
The riots which developed do not generate lack of friendship between the two parties. That's why the House of the Family was set up. This was promoted by the Mosque of Al-Azhar and by the Church. The House of the Family is not a superficial reconciliation entity, but it's a permanent observatory which aims at enlightening the spirit and encouraging sublime moral aspirations. It also aims at disseminating ethics and honesty among all Christians and Muslims. Al-Azhar is the first authority of Islam in Egypt and even in the rest of the world. So it guarantees moderation and rejects radicalism in all its forms. It plays its role in order to disseminate true faith and invites the young Muslims and Christians to address the current source of knowledge. Also, the Oriental Arab Church refuses radicalism. The Egyptian people opposes division because the harmonious relationship between Copts and Muslims personifies this meaning. In the Ifars organized by the Egyptian Copts for their Muslim brothers during Ramadan, we have a sign of this. This explains the unity and the cohesion between the two elements of the nation, and it's one of the aspects of national solidarity in order to strengthen solidarity among citizens. This brotherhood and solidarity relies on affection, love, sincerity, and the fact that the nation belongs to all and religion belongs to the Lord.
فهيا ننهض جميعا.
The people, our people, is composed of young people. We should all achieve world peace, avoiding disagreements and lack of friendship. God created us for us to know each other and love each other, and also to build the universe. Thank you so much, and may peace spread throughout the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professore. Grazie. Ascoltiamo ora dalla voce di Fattah Hassan l'intervento.
And now we'll listen to the message sent by the colleague who cannot be here. First of all, I would like to express my thankfulness, my gratitude
Felicità di essere presente qua perché questo è l'ambiente in cui mi trovo ad agio.
It's to express my gratitude, my thankfulness for Professor Guarnieri and the Rimini meeting for inviting me, and I would like to thank the blessed souls that greatly contribute to the success, the organization of this Rimini meeting. I would like to thank all the volunteers. Thank you very much.
Sono molto orgoglioso di essere presente vicino.
It's an honor to be here close to the leaders of my country, blessed country, in the Gospel and in the Quran, Egypt. I would like to mention Tahani Al-Jibali, Vice President of the Supreme Constitutional Court and President of the meeting in Cairo. So I have a written message that I will attempt to translate into Italian. So at the end of the Cairo meeting, during the open ceremony in the University of Cairo, I said we organized Cairo meeting drawing inspiration upon the role of the Egyptian people and believing in the ingenuity which is part of the Egyptian nature. Egypt has always been at the crossroads of dialogue between cultures and civilizations. Now, all of this mixed up with the essence of the heritage of civilization in Egypt, this heritage will never be uprooted and will remain untouched. I also said that the Egyptian people tend to fall asleep sometimes, but they never really die. And this is an important lesson for the history, for all those who are not aware of, who do not know very well history, or those who read history and then forget it. A few friends have reproached me, among the intellectuals, they reproached me, they told me off all this excessive confidence that I have in the Egyptian people because they were desperate. They had lost faith in disappointment with reference to the ability of the Egyptian people to change something, to change the very sad reality of the daily life in Egypt. A very sad reality based on political tyranny, lack of justice, lack of law and order. But only a few months later, the response, the amazing response of the Egyptian people came. All the people that took to the street on the Tahrir Square and on other squares throughout the country in the glorious revolution of the 25th of January 2011. All the world were looking at us, looking at this revolution, at these riots as an extremely significant event which could indeed be life-changing. This glorious situation, although remaining glorious, is faced with numerous challenges. These challenges are taking place in a confused world, in a disappointed world, saddened world. with many people that are still against dialogue and in favor of racism, grudge, and violence. These people are still in the forefront, are still the leaders. And if these people can still have an impact on the conscience of our peoples. There is a threat whereby we could lose our values, and it costs us so much to reach these values for justice, equality, freedom, and to avoid racism, hatred, and grudge, and to redefine the basis of our coexistence. Our revolution, our fatherlands are threatened by several dangers. First of all, we are fragmented in terms of our own religious identity. The Egyptian nation is divided on the basis of religion, and also other dangers that are related to the political agendas, the fact that various different political coalitions have had the bad habit of building these agendas with the leaders, with the tyrannical regimes of the past. And also all the political and religious groups as an alternative to balanced and proper relations. These challenges are now certainly hindering those who want to rebuild a democratic society in Egypt, which is juster, where all the basic human rights are complied with, a society in which we can experience a cultural, social, and political turning point. We believe that the Lord created us all as free human beings, and then we were made into peoples and tribes so that we can mutually recognize each other and not fighting with each other. We have to meet and then encounter with each other, so the respect of the other, the peaceful coexistence are indispensable instruments to counter the threat of racism and of religious and ethnic differences. And then the lady goes on to say that we have come here to Rimini talking about the values of revolution of the great Egyptian people. All the values that have been at the center of the recent revolution: liberty, human dignity, and social justice for everyone. And we are now ready to cooperate with you all. We are ready to offer you our hands so that we can get together, unite our strengths. You, the believers, those of you who believe in civil and religious values, considered the only wisdom which was God-given, sent from God, from the Lord. And this is the common denominator or the common ground that we have for all religions or different faiths. We firmly believe in religious and cultural pluralism, and we strongly advocate and defend the system of fundamental freedoms, freedom of thinking, freedom of opinion, freedom of religion. And also we respect the moral values of dialogue and of the common good, common interests of all the peoples. And also we think that the attempts to revive disputes or to fuel racist attitudes is a crime towards our countries and towards the entire humanity.
Crediamo, la nostra fede è ferma.
We firmly believe in equality between all human beings without ever underestimating or without making ridiculous every culture, every people, or without disregarding or disrespecting the traditions of all the people. Now, we have faith and we firmly believe in dialogue between different civilizations and different cultures, and also we firmly believe in inter-religious dialogue. Not because we want to quell or we want to disrespect or underestimate the others or or not respect his faith, their faiths or their beliefs. We want to respect the wisdom of this and the value of this diversity. We have common grounds, common values, points on which we can meet so that we can play the role which is based on our common responsibility towards our own countries and towards the future of humanity. This is our pact, this is our promise that we want to renew here in Rimini, wishing that this commitment and this pact will be further renewed in the second Cairo meeting along the banks of the River Nile, under the guidance of the Egyptian people and under the guidance of its glorious revolution. Thank you very much. May God bless you all.
La parola ora al giudice Mekkawy.
And now the floor to Judge Mekkawy.
Buonasera, Don Ambrogio.
Good evening, Father Ambrogio. Ladies and gentlemen, the meeting this year has a special flavor, and no one can deny this. Since the beginning of 2011, major changes have occurred to eliminate all forms of racism and, in general, all forms of human repression. Today, we see these changes in Arab countries. In the recent past, this was also true for the Eastern European countries that pursued the same goals that will lead us somewhere tomorrow in the future. There are forms of tyranny, monopoly of resources and power, and this is true everywhere in all peoples. The nature of the tyranny in all times is the same, as if each tyrant had received or had been endowed from above with certain means to concentrate everything in their hands and subtract the states of all this. Attempts were made at developing relations among peoples that were aspiring to freedom, dignity, and social justice vis-à-vis oppressive and authoritarian regimes. Most of these attempts led to a cul-de-sac, so it was inevitable that a revolution would explode. This is what we see everywhere throughout the world. I participated in it in my country from one Friday to the other. We are united by a noble objective, while the riots are ongoing and flowing like blood in the veins. While in these conditions, I heard the unforgettable sentence of the Italian president, who said, "It's nothing new. The Egyptians, as is in their habit, make history, leave their sign in history." I participated in the crowd. I was part of the crowd, and I received many negative messages that made me cry. I cried because of the harm to my fellows. I tried to defend them because they were weak, but my words were taken away by the wind. They were in vain. And it's because of the fault of those that don't want peoples to prosper. Religion belongs to God, and the homeland belongs to all. The Egyptians had a glorious history that knows of no divisions. Everyone was always granted their own beliefs. The will of God, however, cannot be opposed. I remembered that Jacob was glorified by God after his slavery, and this will be the fate of the people that promoted the riots. I saw simple people giving us bread for free before entering the square, and he refused to be paid, even if it was the only bread that he had. And when one person approached him and offered 20 Egyptian liras, he refused, fiercely refused, and said, "Not today, people are dying in the square in front of my eyes." In that precise moment, in time, Joseph was miraculously leaving his prison to become the second man in the king's palace. Shall we ever be able to follow along this mission to achieve the same level of freedom and organization? Shall we ever be able to start again from the beginning and proceed along this pathway? I remember a Christian lady who was giving me water before the prayers, and I remember also the circle made by the Christians to protect the Muslims while praying, and the same was true for the Muslims vis-à-vis the Christians on Sundays to protect their praying time. There was a platform which was used both as a mosque and as a church on a land that knows no difference between the followers of different religions. I will never be tired of saying that the future generations will judge this experience, and God will send other creatures to the earth. Be God blessed by all of us, the best creator of all. There are some crimes that were made because of ignorance or other reasons. On the other hand, we respected the spirit of revolution and the principles that gave rise to it. We defended the revolution with the blood we have shed. After the revolution, we will start building again in glory, but this will require some time, because our homeland is not just the place where we live. Our homeland lives within ourselves. That's why we shouldn't be concerned. We are living in a time of uncertainty, of great confusion and conflicts. All this, as history teaches us, is quite predictable after revolutions. Order and other aspects change according to the times. You can envisage the impending dangers if there are clashes between religions and sects, but in the end the just will prevail. All the oppressed peoples were subjugated to injustices by politicians that were not able to adequately assess the needs of their times. There is no space, there is no place for their policies among generations where the concepts of life have changed, and the very objectives and technologies have changed. There are no controversies. There should be no controversies among us, peoples of the earth. We should sit down and talk to each other based on a passion for sentiments and feelings, which is part of the history of all peoples. The body of mankind is just one. We have never seen a prophet sent to earth to divide individuals belonging to one group or community. Only disagreement, oppression, and poverty were able to lead us towards those scenarios. Given the scarcity of resources, the poverty of certain peoples, this actually happened, but getting out of this may be possible on the basis of a reasonable dialogue relying on research. So we are asking ourselves, what are the mistakes that we made and what can we do to mend all this? Ladies and gentlemen, the meeting in Rimini, this world event we have been waiting for 1 year, is a model for an harmonious world, living in harmony with all the cultures of its participants. And it's also shared work, common work, characterized by a spirit of generosity and cooperation. At the first meeting in Cairo, we tried to draw inspiration from this spirit, to experience that beauty as an extended space of dialogue among civilizations. The volunteers that so kindly contributed to the meeting and promised to do so year after year to support the new concept of relationship between dialogue and disagreement, relying on respect and search of common denominators. The dialogue which I'm referring to is a dialogue among different cultures and peoples, but the beauty of it is the agreement between the premises and the results. The beauty lies in 2 ears, 1 mouth and 1 heart. The Creator concealed the ears inside the body. Instead, with other organs like the mouth, each the tongue is behind the lips, and a reasonable person must think twice before opening one's mouth. All this just to pronounce one word. A word is a great responsibility. Everybody hears that word. We have been listening to long presentations, and we will listen to other presentations. We need live consciousness, which takes us towards larger spaces in a new concept shared by all, abandoning the idea which we think is associated to the others. Others that may differ from us in their ideas, but not in their bodies. What do people want in their short journey on the earth? They want a life with freedom of thought and freedom of religion. Principles that we all agree. Nobody would disagree. This is the aim of the revolutions of today and tomorrow. And we hope that we can achieve our goals with just one hand carrying a torch of hope, independently of races or creeds. Finally, the realization of an international dialogue is something which is feasible and should be fulfilled. It is man that counts in all these deeds. Thank you.
Ascoltiamo ora il cardinale Antonio Naguib.
And now the Cardinal Antonio Naguib. You have the floor.
Egregia Signora Dottoressa Guarnieri,
Dr. Guarnieri, President of the Rimini Meeting Foundation,
sorelle e fratelli,
ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, present, all members of the audience. It is the first time that I take part in the Rimini meeting. I would like to thank the organization and the Rimini Meeting Foundation for their invitation, which allows me to share this outstanding event with so many distinguished guests. The topic of this year's existence becomes an immense certainty, and with reference to this topic, Egyptian speakers have been invited to talk about the experience of the Cairo meeting on the 28th and 29th of October 2010, and whose title was Beauty, Space for Dialogue, and also something on recent events. This has been indeed an historic event, if I may say so, a revolution in terms of religious dialogue in Egypt, which came only a short time before another glorious revolution, which convinced our society and our country that it still has a long way to go. First of all, what was the meaning of the Cairo meeting in 2010? This very significant event, initiative, was a spin-off, let's say, a spark that spinned off the Rimini meeting. A young man, profoundly Muslim, well-educated, which year after year had participated in the Rimini meeting, was so convinced of the possible benefits in cultural and social terms of this meeting, that he felt the need to repeat this experience in his countries. Professor Farouk, thank you very much.
Sembra
The name Wahel Farouk has a decisive role. Wahel Farouk, Wahel Gonei, the two beginners of these two revolutions. The Cairo meeting has been the outcome of heroic courage and of unlimited hope. We are sure that it will bear its fruit, especially in the following revolution or in January 2011. Now, let's talk about this Arab Spring. How is it perceived in Egypt? You have all followed with great care the evolution, the events, the first steps of these revolutions of the young in January 2011. I will confine myself to a few remarks on the Christian religious aspects in the framework of religious dialogue, since all the other speakers have already described the event from different viewpoints. Now, I cannot talk about the vision or the situation of Christians in Egypt in recent times. I cannot do it without mentioning a very important historic event, that is to say the Synod for the Middle East, with the participation of all the bishops of our region, which took place in the Vatican from the 10th to the 24th of October 2010. That is to say, only a few days prior to the Cairo meeting. We reflected upon our mission as testimonies and how to improve the dialogue. This was what the Synod of the Bishops focused on. But we couldn't figure at that time how our intervention, our action had been decisive. And indeed, a few months later, a revolution started to break out in Tunisia, first of all, and then in Yemen, Syria, Bahrain, etc. They wanted to overhaul the old regime, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and other countries. And the final reports conclude on the very important role of the presence of Christians in the Middle East. In the report, it is indeed said that the Christians in the Middle East are original citizens, natives. They are fully integrated in the social fabric and in the identity of their respective countries. And the bishops insisted and called for a civil state, which is thus defined as a socio-political system based on the respect for the human rights, for their freedom, for inherent rights, for its human nature, for the equality and full citizenship, and including the acknowledgement of the role of religion itself in the public life and also on moral values. So this system recognizes religious freedom, freedom of worship, freedom of conscience, that is to say, you can freely choose your religion. And then a distinction is made between the religious order and the civil order, while respecting the independence of each one. Religion should never be politicized, and state should never prevail over religion.
Leggendo queste parole,
Now, reading these words, I have clear recollections of all the thousands of young people gathered in the square Al-Tahrir and the other squares in Egypt from the 25th of January until the departure of former President Mubarak. And I remember very well the young people shouting their slogans, insisting on civil values. And this is what they intend to do. Now, in the light of these riots and protests, the synods of the bishops recognizes the challenges that are ahead of the Christians in the Middle East. May I remind a few of these challenges. First, the religious and political situation of our countries, especially the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. Second, freedom of religion and freedom of conscience. 3, the growth of the political Islam as of 1970. 4, the problem of migration. And may I say that migration is a great challenge, undermining the very Christian presence in the Middle East. And the synod thus defines the attitude of Christians in their daily life as the Christian testimony at all levels being the most important response under the circumstances that Christians have to live. And all the Christians, all the faithful, are called upon to actively participate in the construction of a town of communion, saying that all the citizens in our countries are confronted with two great challenges: peace and violence. This is certainly even more true today. The situation of warfare and conflicts that we are experiencing generate violence and are exploited by the global terrorism, by the movements, by the extremist movements in the region. The vocation of the Church is service. At any moment in time, we have to come up with our testimony with great humility, in concrete terms, with respect and with love. This is really a life of action. And then the report of the bishops goes on to say that the true love for the people is the most important testimony in our societies. The Catholic Church offers a very significant testimony through works, charity institutions, education institutions, health institutions, and their contribution to social development. Muslims and Christians, we are both called upon to tread the common path. So, regardless of the different conception of men, of their rights and their liberties, regardless of this, we can certainly find common ground, common foundations for our common actions for the good of our own societies and our own countries. We are called upon to look after each other, look after our common good. Let's all build together a town of communion.
In Egitto,
in Egypt, thanks to this revolution, this movement for change that we usually call the revolution of 25th of January, and we have started to look at the future with enthusiasm and optimism. It was the start of a new era marked by brotherhood, by social cohesion, by the disappearing of barriers and religious discrimination. We had, unfortunately, at least 1,000 casualties and over 5,000 people were hurt. But we achieved what we wanted to achieve in only 18 days. The objectives were very simple but fundamental, so fundamental freedoms, dignity and justice. Now, taking into account these positive aspects and other negative events that have already been mentioned by the previous speakers, in taking into account all of this, the conclusion of the report, the final report of the bishops concludes as follows. We have to fulfill our mission of testimony to the service of men, of societies and of our country. We have to work all together to lay the foundations for a new dawn in the Middle East. And this is really the final invitation, building a town altogether, a town of communion to prepare a new dawn in the Middle East based on confidence and on a fruitful commitment, knowing that the Lord is doing his best to help all the people of goodwill. The story tells us that a master of spirituality asked a child, when does the night end and when does the day start? And the disciple replied, I don't know. Well, how can we know it then? And he replied, looking at a man, if you think that this man is a brother, then the day arrives and that's the end of night. But if you see a foreigner or an enemy, then it's night breaking into your heart and the dawn is a long way off. Now, if we want this dawn to arrive, we need a revolution of love in our churches, in our institutions, in our Christian institutions, including the Azhar al-Sharif, in our mosques, and in our Muslim institutions. It was easy to change, to overhaul the regime. Now, it is our duty to change ourselves, from inside, change our ideas, our feelings, and our intentions, our will. This will bring about the change, a new dialogue, bringing people together, fostering dialogue to achieve the common goal that is to build or rebuild our beloved countries based on spiritual values, so that we will be able to overcome the difference, to work together, hand in hand, in a new space of beauty and the dialogue for life and for communion, to build a modern Egypt, determined to continue its history of history-long civilization with a new phase of scientific development on the basis of faith, brotherhood, and moral values. This dawn will arrive when we'll undertake the path of sincere and true dialogue. And I'm saying this because I think there's something that we are still missing. As I said, the path of objective and true dialogue, acknowledging the respect of the other without ever wanting to prevail over the other or imposing one correct vision, and while respecting the differences. Only thus will we be able to live our true identity. We're all children of God, children of the God, and we were all created to respect each other and to create a peaceful society based on brotherhood and with a positive attitude towards the future. No anxiety, but only confidence and courage. Only thus will the dialogue be the garden of beauty, and existence will be an immense certainty. Thank you very much.
Grazie Eminenza.
Ce l'abbiamo fatta.
Grazie, addio. Lei è stato bravissimo. Solo un ringraziamento.
Please allow me to thank all our speakers for the rigor with which they have kept on schedule. I'd like to thank them very much. This order and mutual obedience is an aspect of beauty which moves us. Thank you very much.
Concludo solo con due note.
Let me conclude on two notes. One is the following. There is a major experience of beauty outside the exhibition, which is the exhibition on the Madonnas of Abruzzo, rescued from the earthquake in L'Aquila. Entrance is free. It's at the Municipal Museum, so please visit this exhibition. Second note, today we have seen that this mysterious history that links us to our friends in Egypt continues. This was a new unplanned step in this story and friendship. We are grateful to the mystery of God and the protagonists. Thank you and enjoy your evening.